Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your Audio Amigo, here today with another normal Audio Amigo review. Today we're looking at a new Twin DD set from TRI that I won in a Twitter contest. This is the TRI Draco. It was released in August of 2024 at an MSRP of $60. It is an open-backed 2-dynamic driver set with rather compact looking shells. They are a lot of very competitive IEMs in this price range. Does the Draco manage to set itself apart? Well, let's find out. Quick disclaimer, usually I buy my own sets for review, but as I mentioned just now, I won this in a Twitter giveaway hosted by Keep Hi-Fi. I'll use this opportunity to go ahead and plug my Twitter. I post stuff similar to the community posts, but I'm on there a bit more often. Anyway, I didn't spend any money on this set, so I have no skin in this game, so take that into account as you hear my take on this. I went ahead and linked Keep Hi-Fi's store down below since they're the ones who hosted the giveaway. And as always, this is a non-affiliated link, so don't worry, I'm not making any money off of this. So, disclaimer for transparency's sake over with, let's get into what's inside the box. Inside, you'll find the IEMs on top, and then underneath them, you'll find this case, which I'll talk about in a second. Inside the case, you will find the cable and 9 sets of ear tips in 3 different types. You get 3 sets of these wide bore ear tips. You get 3 sets of TRI's premium Clarion ear tips, which are quite nice. Those are like $10 by themselves. And you get 3 sets of normal narrow bore ear tips in the package. It's a pretty good selection there. But let's go talk about the case. I actually really like this case. It's absolutely the most pocketable case I've seen in a while. It's so thin. Like, this fits IEMs really well. The fabric feels nice. The zipper is solid. Doesn't feel like it's going to fly off at any time. It has a nice rubber thing on it to make it easier to pull. I know that this is a standard case design that any company can order and like print their logo on top of, but I think more companies should be buying this case to print their logo on top of, because I think this is really nice. The fabric feels good. It's sturdy. It doesn't crumple if you squeeze it like this. But if you want an endorsement, Mrs. Audio Amigo hates basically most included cases that come with IEM. She thinks they're too big, they're too cumbersome, they're just horrible. She saw this one and went, wow, I really like that one. So yeah, overall, excellent selection of tips. I like it when they give us premium branded ear tips, and top tier carrying case. I think this is overall a really good accessories package. Let's take a closer look at that cable. So this is a silver 2-wire twist with a rubber coating. It doesn't feel too rubbery in the hands, and it doesn't snag or stick on your skin as you handle it. The 3.5mm connector doesn't have any branding on it, and neither does the Y-split actually, but they are metal and they feel pretty nice, so no branding on the Y-split. The chin slider works well with the rubber coating on the cable, and it stayed put during my walk, so not too bad. The ear hooks themselves are soft and pliable, no discomfort or dragging on the backs of the ears. You get a flush-mounted 2-pin connector on the bottom, and they're kind of hard to spot, but that little red indicator right there is your stereo indicator. Very subtle marking. Overall, this cable isn't bad. I wish at this price point it was maybe a little bit more premium with some branding or markings on it, but yeah, it's about, I'd say, slightly below average for this price range, but it's not absolutely terrible. So let's launch into the build quality. These are full metal shells, CNC milled out of aluminum alloy. The nozzles are milled out of the same piece of aluminum as well, and they're actually part of the lower shell, as you can see there, so these are not replaceable. They do have a metal mesh just inside the tip there for filtering purposes. As far as vents go, as I mentioned earlier, these are advertised as open back, so there are actually several. On the sort of inside of the IEM here, you just get that one vent hole, which I think is above the 8mm driver. On the sides of the shell, you've got these slots that work as vents here, also behind the 8mm driver. And then on the back, you've got one massive vent here above the 6mm driver. And then you get the TRI logo itself, which if I zoom in here, you can see is also a vent. So 0 issues with driver flex on these. These are very well vented. You'll get no pressure buildup with these either. Overall, I think there's nothing to complain about in terms of build quality. Full metal shells are about as durable as they get. I see no real issues with these. If I had to make a prediction, there might be corrosion issues down the line with all of those vents and full metal construction, but I can't say that for a fact. These are still new, haven't had any reports of that. If you want to be safe, maybe store these with some silica gel. So let's go ahead and call up the specs. These are a dual DD set. The larger driver is an 8mm LCP diaphragm, and the smaller one is a 6mm titanium-coated diaphragm driver. TRI claim that the 8mm exclusively handles the low frequencies, and the 6mm does everything else, but they don't really list a crossover point for the drivers, and they give no indication on their graphs or graphics as to where the crossover point is, so we'll have to see how they perform together later. Even though the shells are all metal, the small size and aluminum alloy makes them nice and lightweight compared to some other full metal builds. The nozzle is a little bit wider than average, but it's nowhere near as big as something like the Truthier's Zero. Double DD sets can be a little power hungry. That isn't really the case for the Draco. It's got 18 ohm impedance and 105 sensitivity, so you should be mostly fine running these out of phones, tablets, or older devices like Walkmans and CD players. You might want a cheap dongle DAC like the Apple dongle or one of the cheaper ones with the CX31993 chips in them. These do like a little bit of power. I'll talk about that later. But for now, it's time for the cool wall. The Draco essentially are relying on their shape to stand out from the crowd, and I think it kind of works. The wedge shape here isn't exclusive to the Draco, but it is something that you haven't seen in a while. At least I haven't seen it in a while. I wish it had a bit more flare or color going on. The only real color is the red and blue dots that indicate the stereo. It doesn't do all that much for me in terms of design. I think it's very utilitarian, very, standard. I'm going to put these in bland. They just don't look particularly interesting or cool to me. I think they're very utilitarian. But why don't we check in with the Council of Ladies and see what their opinion is on these? It looks like they agree with me overall. Mostly mez, a couple of no's, so no, this is not a good-looking set. That obviously means you won't get any compliments for wearing these, so don't go out expecting to impress the ladies. Finally, these are their thoughts. Not a whole lot to say, which I think actually says a lot about the design of these. They're just very safe, very utilitarian, very standard. But let's move on to comfort. These, like I said, pretty lightweight, and they're a very small shape compared to some other more bulbous IEMs, let's say. I found them easy to fit in the ears. They were easy for me to get and maintain a seal. They worked with both deeper and shallower fits. I personally rocked it with the deeper fit and my standard testing ear tips. I was able to wear this for long listening and gaming sessions with no issues. As far as my wife and her tiny ears test goes, these passed. Again, the lightweight, small shape, it helped them nestle neatly into her outer ear. She had no issues maintaining a seal with her ear tips. One thing she did say, however, is that she could only wear these for at most about 2 hours before she had to take them out of her ears. Something about the size of the nozzle in her ear canal being sort of borderline. I consider that to be a pass. 2 hours is plenty of time to get through a couple of albums or a couple of games. Quick note on sound bleed and isolation. There are a lot of large vents on this unit, and what that means is that at higher volumes, you will bleed some sound into your surroundings. However, I found that you have to get these quite loud to make that happen, and I honestly don't think it's a real problem. Isolation, though, is worse than normal. All of these vents will let a lot of outside noise in, and they definitely are less isolating than their peers, even if you're using something like foam tips. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking about buying this set. But all that said, let's get into how these sound. We'll go ahead and start, as always, with the bass response. The sub-bass extension here is good, and the mid-bass is boosted in a nice way. There's a good amount of bass energy, but I feel that the overall bass quality is a little lacking for me. The deeper drops are missing some of that deep rumble that I find satisfying, and the mid-bass notes, while punchy, don't feel as maybe fast or impactful as they should. Some of this can be remedied by upping the volume, but I feel like the issues still linger even at higher listening levels. This was most evident to me in Armin van Buuren's Anita, where I felt like some of the bass notes were sort of bleeding into one another and smearing each other a little bit. Each note has some sustain on it so that it lasts into the next one, but the next note should have enough punch to cut through the sustain of the previous one and assert itself. And while it does happen with some of the heavier notes, that's not true of all of them, particularly some of the lighter ones. The bass just feels smooth and relaxing in a way that it's not as punchy as I would prefer. Some folks will really like this presentation. It gives you good bass quantity without being so fatiguing for you people that feel that bass can be fatiguing. I just wish it was a little more tactile and maybe a bit more aggressive. Kick drums and bass guitar are fine though. Fat Larry's band's Act Like You Know has the kick drum and bass feel present in the mix. They have a good presence. They keep the funk of the song going without getting drowned out by the rest of the track. Like I said, the bass presentation here is interesting because it's boosted. It's more forward, but it doesn't feel boosted to your ears. There are instruments like bass and kick drum, like I said, they feel more forward than they would in like a neutral or a bright tuned set, and you feel that boost, but there's this sort of softness to the bass that gives it just a smoother, more relaxed sound. I honestly don't know if I like it. It's sort of a weird middle ground between neutral presentation and a more bass heavy set. Maybe it's due to the more open nature of the shells or the fact that the drivers are smaller than other 2DD sets, but the bass to me comes off as relaxing rather than aggressive or punchy. I also found the mid-range presentation kind of interesting. The lower mids are warmed up by that mid-bass boost, and the sort of soft, relaxed tonality from the bass is in this lower mid-range as well. It adds a nice warmth and darker tonality that can be great for some male vocals. ZZ Top, for example. Sharp Dressed Man has some lower, more gravelly sounding vocals, and the mid-bass boost adds like that nice darker tonality that makes them stand out a little bit more to what, it's me is a good way. It's not natural, but I think it's a good coloration. This set avoids masking issues with this track, even though there's a lot of distortion on the guitar and the bass, and these pitches can be rather close to each other. You can still separate the instruments in the playback. The sort of soft, smooth tonality makes it a little bit harder to do on some tracks than others, but it's still doable. If I had to guess where the crossover between these two drivers is, I would say it's somewhere in the middle of the mid-range. Reason I say that is that female vocals are kind of untouched by that darker tonality. Fana's I Supreme has Tawana's vocals sounding natural, clean. The mid-bass boost doesn't impact the tonality at all. There's maybe a tiny bit of warmer tonality on some of the lower notes that she hits, but nothing sticks out as sounding completely off or wrong with the performance. If anything, there's a tiny bit of vocal forwardness on this set that I think makes female vocals pop out a little bit in a more pleasant way. The mid-range tonality is, again, relaxed. There's a bit of mid-bass bleed here, but not enough to ruin or destroy the replay. There's also just barely enough instrument separation to keep things from sounding muddy or muffled. I feel like it's walking a tightrope, and thankfully it doesn't fall off. The theme of relaxed, chill sound continues into the upper mids and treble. Cymbals and hi-hats have natural, great-sounding decay with good wash in their upper harmonics. They don't sound unnatural or metallic to me. They're further back in the mix than maybe I would prefer, but there is energy when the song calls for it, but overall it's very laid back, as I said, in terms of presentation. There's not a lot of sparkle or energy up here. The cymbals in Fleetwood Mac's Dreams only really reach out when the hits are heavier. The smaller hits lack a little bit of definition. They're still there and you can hear them. They're just maybe not as clean as I personally would like. That's all just down to the amount of energy. As I mentioned with the bass, you can solve this problem by just cranking the volume, and thankfully this set has a relaxed enough treble presentation that you can actually crank the volume. But I think cranking the volume can be a crutch for some sets, and that's another topic for another time. The upper harmonics on female vocals I think are very well done here. Supercell's Kimi no Shiranai Monogatari sounds pretty good here. The forward female vocal presentation works well with the clean harmonics. Nagi Yanagi's sort of breathy, melodic voice has no distorted sustain or vibrato in it. She sounds very natural, very good on this set. Overall, the treble presentation is clean and accurate. It's lacking some sparkle, intensity, a little bit of excitement, even compared to some other warm sets, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Let's talk about technicalities. So on the low end, I listened to Duke Ellington's Take the A-Train, and while I could hear Wendell Marshall on the bass, I had to really concentrate, or like I said, turn up the volume, to hear the finger slides and string buzzing that I know is there. The softer low end here makes the bass much less fatiguing, but it also makes some details a bit harder to make out. On the higher end, I listened to OXT's Hollow Hunger. That song has castanets, hand claps, and other sort of palm-based percussion all throughout the song. But during the choruses, it essentially gets drowned out to the point where they're barely audible. On what I would consider a well-resolving set, you can pick up the ever so faint presence of the castanets in the mix. With this set, they're just barely there. Like I said earlier, you can raise the volume or really focus if you want to hear them. Overall, I don't think this set fails in terms of technicalities, but it isn't what I would call good or impressive either. The details are there, but this tuning is pushing them pretty far back to where, like I said, you have to either crank the volume, which I think is a crutch, or really focus with your eyes closed, try and pick them out. Where this set absolutely shines, though, is in stereo separation and soundstage. Mediterranean Sundance on these was nice and wide. Both guitarists had a lot of room to do their thing. This is overall a very wide-sounding set. And the party keeps on going when we get to Perceive 3D Soundstage. On well-mastered tracks, I feel like this set just kind of opens up a little bit in ways that other sets in this price range just don't. Jamiroquai's Virtual Insanity sounded pretty open on these. The instruments are all still sort of in your head because that's the way the mastering is. But the vocals, the percussion, and particularly the piano, they all sound just a tiny bit further out, front and back, left and right, than is typical. I don't know if that's caused by all the porting here, or if it's down to the tuning, or if it's a placebo effect. But in my opinion, the stereo separation and perceived soundstage is 100% the party piece on this set, and it's definitely above average for sets at this price. Alright, so time for comparisons. The Draco here is a straight-up warm set to my ears. It's a very soft, relaxed, almost lo-fi sounding, warm, comfortable sound that I think in the $50 to $70 price bracket, there's not a whole lot of sets that are exactly like this, especially when you consider that peculiar tonality. But we'll start with what I think is the closest in terms of overall sound and price. This is the Tripowin Kailua. It was released in June of 2023 at an MSRP of $70. This is also a dual DD set, but the drivers are different sizes. The Kailua is using a 10mm and a 6mm, whereas the Draco is using an 8 and a 6. The Kailua also has a relaxing, laid-back tonality, which is interesting, because when I listened to them side by side with the Draco, volume matched, this came off as more exciting, more energetic, more V-shaped. The bass was more satisfying to my ears on the Kailua, and the bass quality is just that little bit better. The upper harmonics are smoother on the Draco, but the Kailua has a bit of sparkle and excitement to the treble that makes it sound more dynamic compared to the Draco. This is a really interesting IEM. It's making the Kailua come across as V-shaped and energetic when it typically doesn't come off that way. I will say the Draco also comes with a better accessories package than the Kailua, but right now the Kailua is sort of being end-of-lifed. It's everywhere that still has it in stock has it on clearance for $30 versus the $70 that it debuted at, so it's something to consider if you're looking at this one. Next up, we have the Kefine Delci. This is a warm-leaning single DD set priced at $75, but we all know it's been kind of on permanent sale for $60. Again, the Draco makes the Delci sound more V-shaped by comparison. The bass quality on these is fairly similar. The Draco has a bit less sub-bass rumble than the Delci, but a bit more mid-bass presence. Both sets have a bit of that warmed-up mid-range thing going on. The Draco has a bit more vocal forwardness compared to the Delci, and again, I wouldn't describe the Delci as being a sparkly set, but compared to the Draco, the Delci comes off as having that little extra treble energy that makes things pop. These are essentially the same price and come with very similar accessories packages. I prefer the case on the Draco, and you do get those nice triclarion tips, but the cable on the Delci is much nicer than the one on the Draco. Really quick, I just wanted to say that everything that I just said about the Delci in comparison to the Draco also applies to the EW300 in comparison to the Draco, specifically with the gold nozzles. With the gold nozzles, these two are tuned super similarly. So, EW300 compared to the Draco. EW300, more sub-bass, similar mid-range, less forward vocals, sounds sparkly by comparison even with the gold nozzles. So, since these two are similar, I did a bit of a 2-in-1 there. Lastly, and completely unnecessarily, I'm going to bring in the Letshuoer SO8. Okay, not necessarily because I want to compare these two, okay, but because I think it's something interesting to talk about. Let's say if you look at the graphs of these two, and I'll pull it up and make it a bit bigger than usual, they're near identical up until around 3000 hertz, but in the ear they sound very different. The SO8, in my opinion, sounds better across the board in every category except for maybe 3D Soundstage. In my opinion, the difference is the driver. The planar driver in the SO8 lets you boost the bass to similar levels as the Draco without paying that penalty where it colors the mid-range. It also lets you have the same non-fatiguing treble tuning that the Draco has without sacrificing the fine details. The Draco honestly sounds like a softer, lower res version of the SO8, but you wouldn't know that looking at the graph. This is one of the reasons I don't use graphs a ton in my reviews. I'll show them to you guys, I think they're important, but I don't really refer to them or point out frequency ranges because I feel like while they're a good way of getting a general idea as to the overall tonality of an IEM, there are nowhere near a complete enough picture of the overall sound of a set. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to the comparisons. So, of all the sets on the table, including the SO8, the Draco is the most relaxing and laid-back sounding of the bunch. It also has what feels like the widest soundstage of all of these to me, with excellent dimensionality. It makes the rest of the sets on the table, however, sound more energetic, specifically in the treble, just because of the way it's tuned. That said, if you want something a bit brighter than the Draco, okay, the Delci or the EW300 are both excellent choices. The Kailua is the best value here because it's, like I said, it's on final clearance. So if you're watching this a year or two after I upload this, it might be out of stock at this point and isn't relevant, but I just wanted to mention that in case you want to pick up something sort of similar. I think this is sort of a less refined version of the tuning on these two, but I still think it's pretty decent. Lastly, the SO8, it's in a completely different price bracket, but in my opinion, it absolutely beats everything on the table here very easily. Last thing I did want to mention here, if you use the Draco with the included tri-clarion tips, which are these taller wide bore ones here, they change the sound in an interesting way. As is typical for wide bore ear tips, they will boost the treble frequencies and sort of mute the bass a little bit. If you prefer that brighter sound and don't mind losing some lower frequency impact, go for the tri-clarion tips. Only reason I mention it here at the end is because you could technically stick those tips on all of these and change the sound in very similar ways. Alright, so I made the competition vanish with movie magic. It's time to put these on the AudioAmigo Arbitrary rating scale. The Draco is quite unique as far as I'm concerned. It's the most relaxing of the relaxing sets. It's warm without having fatiguing bass. It has a bit of vocal focus without being shouty or overly energetic in the treble. Doing comparison listening for this set was kind of confusing for my brain. The Draco consistently came across as softer sounding than the other sets, even when volume matched. It was a very interesting experience. It took a while, but this set did kind of vibe with me. It feels kind of like a classic sound signature, for lack of a better term. It feels like it's from the 70s or 80s. It's not a super detailed set, and it doesn't have, bass head levels of low-end grunt or anything, but I honestly think it kind of works. It's like if the lo-fi trend was represented by an IEM, it would be this one. I kind of dig that lo-fi sound. In addition, I think this is probably the single safest set for treble-sensitive folks that I've ever seen. It has enough detail to not sound completely muffled or muted. I think this is definitely a specialist set. Earlier when I was talking about the mid-range tuning, I made the analogy that this set is sort of walking a tightrope. It's trying to sound as soft and as relaxing and as comfortable as possible without sounding muddy, muted, or muffled in terms of instrument separation and detail. And honestly, I think it just barely pulls it off. It's not amazing by any means, but I do think it's unique, and in a sea of what seems to be the same tunings recycled over and over and over again, it's kind of nice to encounter something that tries something different, something that takes a risk, and kind of works. Because of that, I'm going to put it in, but I like this. It was a very borderline decision. I spent most of my listening time thinking that this was going to go in good, but I don't think it's flawed enough to end up in good. I think there are people out there who are generally really going to enjoy this tuning. That being said, do I recommend these? Yes, but very conditionally. You either have to be an extremely treble sensitive individual, or you have to be looking for the most absolute relaxing, listening experience at this price range. I think this set is pretty well priced at $60. The accessories package, I think, is actually quite nice. You get a set of premium triclarion tips as well as the other standard ones. They let you try out that sort of brighter sound without having to shell out for the tips. So, $10 here or there is kind of nice. They're built very solid. They come with a decent cable. They're pretty darn unique at this price point. I keep saying this, but this IEM really did give me those like chill lo-fi vibes. I can see myself, pulling this out every once in a while for certain genres, specifically future funk, just for the fun of it. But like I said, I would really only recommend this to extremely treble sensitive folks, people who are looking for an extremely relaxed listening experience, or maybe people who want to try out an open-backed IEM, seeing if the soundstage gets bigger for their ears. I think those three groups of people will be the people that I would recommend this to. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this one. This was an odd one to review. Every single time I went to compare this with another set, volume matched, it just seemed so soft and lifeless when I put the other set in my ears. And then when I came back to this, after my brain had gotten used to the other set, this just came off sort of chill. It was kind of just nice. It was like putting on a blanket. This is my first IEM from TRI that I've ever tried out. I am interested in some of their other sets, specifically the i3 Mark III. That driver combo looks super interesting to me. But yeah, thanks to Keep Hi-Fi for having me win the contest. I know they picked me at random, but I appreciate it. But that's going to be it for the moment. I appreciate everyone's continued support. We hit 700 subscribers, which is honestly absolutely amazing for me. I never thought I would be here this quickly. Y'all have been absolutely awesome. Thank you all so much for watching, for all your support, for all your comments. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews. I will catch y'all next time.